Hi, I'm Shocker. I've been spamming Sorcerer since release. I find the class extremely intriguing due to its variety and depth, so I decided to test everything and make a guide. There's a lot to go over, so let's just jump in. Sorcerer is part of the caster family. Sorcerer's spells are treated as spells when casting and as skills when recharging, meaning that each spell in your spell memory wheel is treated as an independent skill with an independent cooldown. Sorcerer also has the phenomenal ability to not require a magic item to use spell memory to cast spells. This means you are casting spells literally with just your hands and equipping an item isn't required. And by hands, I mean both hands. Each hand is treated as an independent spellcasting magic weapon, if you will. This means you can cast and channel both hands completely independently with independent timing. Hold Q or E to change spells, hold left click or right click to charge left and right hand respectively, release left click and right click to cast the spell. There are also special merge spells. If you fully charge a specific combination of spells in both hands simultaneously, you'll have the option to press R to merge those spells into a completely new spell. Once you've completely charged the merger, you can release left and right click to cast the merge spell. Those are the main unique traits of Sorcerer. Now let's move on to the base stats. There's some good news and there's some bad news. The good news is you get 100 base HP, which is 6 HP more than Wizard. The bad news is our base move speed is 295, the lowest base move speed in the game. However, it's not all bad. Because Sorcerer can cast spells without holding a magic weapon, we can add the move speed back in. The least movement speed penalty on a magical item is on the spellbook at -10 move speed, which means if we're up against a spellbook user, our spell casting ready base move speed is effectively 305. Now we'll move on to the class tab. Sorcerer only has two skills, Sorcery 1 and Sorcery 2, which are essentially Spell Memory 1 and Spell Memory 2. Putting Sorcery on each hand will allow you to switch what spell is selected in each hand independently. Sorcery is a complicated class, where many things affect many things. For this reason, I'll be going over the perks starting with the options requiring the least decision making first. I'll then equip the perks I recommend starting out on. The first perk we'll be looking at is Spell Merge. If you don't equip Spell Merge, you will not have the option to merge spells, even if you have the correct combination of spells charged up. Sorcerer has a total of 14 single spells and 11 possible merge spells. In order to test out all that Sorcerer has to offer, we need this perk, so I recommend taking this. The next perk we'll be looking at is Spell Stride. Gain 5% move speed bonus while casting spells. When charging spells, your move speed is reduced dramatically. When charging with both hands, this reduction is even greater. Mobility is extremely valuable on casters, and with no drawbacks, this perk is an easy pick. The next perk we'll be looking at is Spell Sculpting. Increases the range of all spells by 25% and the area of effect by 25%. This affects most of Sorcerer's spells. Larger AoEs means hitting targets is more likely and improves zoning, while longer range means the max distance you'll be hitting your targets from is further away, putting you at a safer distance for poke. Spell Sculpting comes with a drawback of increasing your cooldowns by 25%. If we look at our spells, Summon Earth Elemental has a 21-second cooldown. If we then put on Spell Sculpting, you'll see that Summon Earth Elemental is now 26 seconds cooldown, adding 25%, 5 seconds, to the Summon Earth Elemental cooldown. The lower the tier, the less impactful this downside is. The upside of Spell Sculpting is fantastic, while the drawbacks are minimal. For this reason, I recommend taking Spell Sculpting. The next perk we'll be looking at is Time Distortion. All spellcasting times are reduced to 0, but cooldown times are increased by 4 times. Channeling and casting spells takes time, and with merge spells, you need time to channel the individual spells and time to merge the spells, and time for the animation of releasing the spell. Time Distortion skips directly to the casting animation part, dramatically improving our mobility and our ability to react to situations where getting an ability off immediately can be the difference between life and death. This is an incredibly powerful perk that comes with a sizable drawback, increasing your cooldowns by 4 times. However, there are a couple of things to consider. As soon as a spell goes on cooldown, it starts recharging no matter what. During this, we can switch to other spells that are off cooldown and later cycle back to the spell once it's done recharging. With 4 spells available in each hand for a total of 8 single spells, the longer cooldowns aren't as detrimental as they may look on paper, because a spell on cooldown doesn't obstruct our ability to cast other spells. Experienced sorcerer players may play around cooldowns and rotate through spells fluidly, effectively negating most of the downside altogether. On the other hand, if you want to always have the option to reuse the same spells back to back, or want consistent access to higher tier spells with longer base cooldowns, Time Distortion's downside may not be worth the drawbacks. Generally, I recommend taking Time Distortion. However, when learning and testing spells on repeat, I recommend taking Time Distortion off to allow for short wait times. Now let's look at a combination of Time Distortion and Spell Sculpting. Spell Sculpting calculates the 25% based on the original cooldown of the spell and adds the flat value at the end. Summon Earth Elemental is at 84 seconds, and then we add in Spell Sculpting. Earth Elemental is now at 89 seconds. It has still gained 5 seconds as it did without Time Distortion, meaning that it is calculated independently of Time Distortion's multiplier, making Spell Sculpting and Time Distortion a good combination, where Spell Sculpting's downside is even more minimal when used together with Time Distortion. The next perk we'll be talking about is Manifold. Manifold reduces cooldowns of all spells by 25%, but reduces spell casting speed by 25% and loses 5% move speed bonus. Manifold calculates its 25% the exact same way that Spell Sculpting calculates its 25% downside. At first glance, Manifold looks like a great way to counteract the Time Distortion's downside, but unfortunately the internal formula is not favorable. On top of this, the downside of losing 5% move speed bonus at all times is a monumental hit to the mobility that is so crucial on a caster. The upside of Manifold simply isn't worth it, so we won't be taking this perk. The last perk we'll be talking about is Apex of Sorcery. While casting spells, reduce move speed by 99%, but gain 25% magical damage bonus and 25% spell casting speed. There's a lot to consider when looking at the downside of immobility. This 1% move speed only applies once your feet touch the ground while channeling. Players often will jump and start a cast mid-air to avoid taking the move speed slow hit until touching the ground, and even with bunny hopping, this will not completely negate the downside of Apex of Sorcery. On one hand, channeling with both hands and moving at 100 move speed, and taking a hit to lower that from 100 to 0 may not feel like much of a change at all, making the 25% bonus damage quite favorable. Another option is to keep Time Distortion, making cast time so short that the time spent immobile is insignificant. In that case, I would recommend swapping Spell Stride. This is because Apex of Sorcery puts you at 1% move speed, making Spell Stride's buff extremely insignificant, making Spell Stride obsolete and a perfect swap for Apex of Sorcery, allowing you to take Apex of Sorcery with Time Distortion. These are the perks that I recommend starting out on, and if you wish to take Apex of Sorcery, I would swap it for Spell Stride. Now we will move on to spells. In the Sorcery tab, the first thing you'll notice is 2 slots that cannot be removed. Suppress Sorcery is the spell slot you choose in order to go into melee combat. Otherwise, left and right clicks would be preoccupied with casting spells. In order to stop casting spells, you must select this slot. Choosing Suppress Sorcery on the left wheel frees up left click. Choosing it on the right wheel frees up right click. When it comes to spells, they are organized here by cost of memory. If you are out of memory, you will not be able to cast those spells. Cooldowns go up with tiers. The higher the tier, the longer the cooldown, the more spell memory required. The right side is single spells, the left side is merge spells. You will only be choosing the single spells. As you choose single spells, mergeable spells will show up here. Hovering over a merge spell will highlight the single spells required to cast it. Highlighting a single spell will highlight the merge spells that this single spell can be evolved into. Keep in mind that in order to merge spells, you must channel both spells in separate hands. If you put these spells on the same hand, channeling both simultaneously isn't possible, making merging those spells impossible. This juggling act makes spell builds very complicated to put together. I have a few ways that I organize spells in order to make this process easier. First, we'll talk about the type categorization. The types are a way to separate spells by their look and function. This makes it easier to track what tools a spell build provides, and therefore what answers and options you have in different situations. Here are the types I use when categorizing spells. Shot spells create small projectiles with focus on damage and single target. The single spells in this category are Fire Arrow and Ice Spear. Fire Arrow shoots 3 homing missiles, applying burn. Ice Spear shoots a torpedo with Pierce. The merge spells in this category are Elemental Bolt and Flamefrost Spear. Elemental Bolt shoots a magnum bullet, applying burn and frostbite. Flamefrost Spear shoots a big torpedo, applying burn and frostbite. Beam spells are a channel during which you can move. Where you shoot a beam, you can aim that does damage over time. The single spell in this category is Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt is just Palpatine's lightning. The merge spell in this category is Flamethrower. Flamethrower is a flamethrower. AoE, or Area of Effect, are abilities that deal damage over time in an area with focus on damage over utility. The single spells in this category are Flamestrike and Fire Orb. Flamestrike erupts magma, leaving behind a fire. Fire Orb is a slow-traveling orb of fire. On contact, it explodes like a small fireball. The merge spells in this category are Lightning Storm and Wall of Fire. Lightning Storm is a channel that creates a shock zone, zapping and slowing everyone inside it. Wall of Fire is a line of fire. CC, or Crowd Control, are abilities that create an area effect that control or suppress the movement of enemies. The single spells in this category are Windblast, Vortex, Levitation, Eruption, Waterbolt, and Glaciate. Windblast is a long-range directional knockback. Vortex is a short-range surrounding knockback. Levitation is a single target jump, then glide. Eruption is a very strong knock-up. Waterbolt is a slow-traveling sticky bomb that applies wet. Glaciate applies frostbite to your melee attacks. The merge spell in this category is Lightning Vortex. Lightning Vortex is Vortex that does more damage and applies a slow. Mobility abilities grant special movement options to yourself or your teammates. The single spell in this category is Levitation. The merge spell in this category is Electric Dash. Electric Dash is a teleport. DOT, or damage over time abilities, are abilities that focus on granting you passive damage over time without needing to aim the ability. The single spell in this category is Lightning Sphere. Lightning Sphere is an electric aura applying slow.
I don't know about chunks that help.
The merge spell in this category is Summon Lava Elemental. Summon Lava Elemental summons a melee fire golem that leaves behind a fire trail. Block abilities protect you by enhancing your stats or by placing some form of barrier between you and enemies in order to block projectiles and damage. The single spells in this category are Stone Skin and Summon Earth Elemental. Stone Skin buffs your PDR and physical damage. Summon Earth Elemental summons a ranged Earth Golem that lobs boulders at enemies. The merged spells in this category are Icebound, Mud Shield, Thorn of Earth, and Summon Lava Elemental. Icebound is the classic Ice Mage Ice Block. Mud Shield is a directional shield. Thorn of Earth is a door block and ramp in one.
It literally just makes a thorn.
Try walking through. And you jump, crouch. Types are helpful for determining the strengths and vulnerabilities of your spell build. However, determining which single and merge spell combinations are going to be the most manageable for playability and fluidity is a separate challenge. I'll explain now how I use groups to tackle this. Groups are a way to separate spells by how synergetic they are with each other, and how intuitive they are to use, making gameplay fluid and therefore easier to manage. I like to group spells in a way that grants a high yield of merge spells, while keeping to a strong theme that's easy to follow. Here are the groups. The zoning group consists of Flamestrike, Eruption, and Levitation, which can merge into Thorn of Earth and Wall of Fire. Flamestrike and Eruption are telegraphed due to their visual windup, making them difficult to land in open modules. This makes them way more reliable in narrow hallways and near doorways. Flamestrike and Eruption merge into Wall of Fire, which can help you hit players perched near doorways and around corners. Levitation and Eruption merge into Thorn of Earth, which can be used to block doorways. While in open modules, Levitation can be used on its own to make enemy player movement more predictable, making landing Flamestrike and Eruption more reliable. The protection group consists of Stoneskin, Waterbolt, and Glaciate, which merge into Icebound and Mud Shield. Stoneskin is a solid protective spell. It can be evolved into Mud Shield to deal with ranged attacks, or into Icebound to deal with close-up melee attacks. Stoneskin and Glaciate can also be used independently to give you a strong edge in melee combat, while Waterbolt can be used to zone off doorways when running. The control group consists of Vortex, Levitation, Lightning Bolt, and Lightning Sphere. All air spells control movement, while all lightning spells apply slow effects. Electric Sphere creates a sphere on you. Levitation moves things somewhere else. Lightning Storm moves the sphere somewhere else. Vortex gives you an escape from enemies. Lightning Bolt creates a beam in a direction. Electric Dash gives you an escape by moving you in a direction. Lastly, Vortex can be evolved by Electric Sphere into Lightning Vortex. The last group is Barrage, which consists of Fire Arrow, Ice Spear, Windblast, Waterbolt, and Flamestrike. Fire Arrow, Ice Spear, and Windblast are your base spells. Waterbolt and Flamestrike upgrade Fire Arrow and Ice Spear into Elemental Bolt and Flamefrost Spear. Windblast upgrades into Flamethrower. These are the main 4 groups. That is all for now. I intend to release a part 2 going into more detail about each ability, their quirks, and interactions. If you have questions or any constructive criticism, please comment below. I hope you found this guide helpful, and I'll see you in the dungeon.